in about 5 seconds here, we will officially be live on Facebook. So. Boom, we are live on Facebook. So, like I said, we will wait about a minute or two, just to kind of give people some time to kind of get in here, and then we will get started. So I like it, and then I'll share it with my personal social media network. So Lee, how are things over at Men Stopping Violence?
Things are good. I mean, it's been very busy. We've been doing a similar biweekly conversation. We actually have one later this afternoon where we've been gathering people in our community to have conversations on different topics, and that's
awesome.
It's been taking up a lot of our time. We've transitioned our classes online. There's a pretty steep learning curve for that.
Mm-hmm.
And then everyone, a lot of our projects are trying to figure out how to go from engaging men in person to engaging men virtually.
Yeah.
So that's good. We're planning our first online training in June, and figuring out all the bells and whistles of the software. We should have done better previously with online training, but at least now we're forced to do it, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, man. Like this has been a fun. I mean, I won't say fun. It's been an interesting time, and I can tell you, this is one of those things that I am looking forward to continuing post COVID. Mm-hmm. So, and just so that you guys know, we'll officially get started. We're live right now on Facebook, but we will officially get started at 10:05. I have 10:04 right now. All right, let's do it, man. We are live on Facebook. I am excited again. Excited about this conversation that we are about to have. Just because I think this is probably a conversation that we've never had before as an organization. We've probably talked about it on its surface, and I know Kath and Nancy, both of you guys have talked to me about it. And you've talked to our staff about family violence intervention programs, but I don't think that this is a conversation that we've ever brought to the community. And so when we were pitching all the things that we wanted to talk about, this one was the one that excited me the most, but that I also felt the most inadequate to host, because this is probably the subject that I know the least about. So when I know the least about something, that means it's best that the conversation gets centered by our experts. And so I'm happy to have joined with me today Nancy Freehoff, Kath the Blackwell, and Lee. I don't want to butcher your last name, so I'm going to pitch it to you. Let you tell us who you are and what you do for Men Stopping Violence.
Thanks, Jeffrey. So my last name is Giordano.
Thank you.
Yeah. I've heard many different pronunciations, so it makes sense that you are hesitant to give it a try. But I'm the director of training at Men Stopping Violence. I'm also one of the class facilitators. So I teach our Thursday evening intervention class at Men Stopping Violence.
That's awesome. So give me a little background real quick before I pitch it to Nancy and Catherine for their introductions. What do you guys do over at Men Stopping Violence?
So Men Stopping Violence has been around this is our 38th year. We got our start specifically intervening with men. And back since 82 when we started, we've been developing our programs and our practices. So we're not strictly intervening with men who abuse anymore. We're also incorporating a lot of prevention work and a lot of education work. So our mission is to engage men in communities to take action to end violence against women. And so we do that through intervention as part of it. We do a lot of incorporation of prevention and practices into our intervening with men who batter, but then we have specific prevention programs as well.
That's awesome, man. I'm glad we got you on today. So Miss Blackwell, how about you take a quick second? I mean, you're world famous by now. Obviously, everyone in at least Georgia should know you, if not nationally. But take a second and introduce yourself.
Hi, good morning. My name is Katha Blackwell, and I am the Vice President of Shelter Services and Supportive Housing with PADV. I've been with PADV for almost 5 years now, and I oversee our shelter services and supportive housing.
Awesome. And Miss Nancy Freehoff, take it away.
Sure. My name is Nancy Freehoff. I'm the CEO of Partnership Against Domestic Violence, which basically means I get to work with an amazing team of staff that does amazing work.
Yeah. Hey, so Katha, just so that you know, the first question's coming at you, but all the audience that are watching today, I encourage you to like and share this, because this will be an awesome conversation. And I also encourage you to ask questions. If there's something specific that you'd like us to talk about, or if there's a question after hearing some of the conversation, please just drop it in the comment section. We are monitoring it so that we can be an active participant with you guys. So Katha, the first question is, can a victim change the actions of their abuser?
Absolutely not. I think a lot of times we have victims who want to fix the problem. And
right.
So in their mind, they want to help the person that they love get better or help them change the relationship. But at the end of the day, the victim cannot fix this situation. They cannot fix him or her. They can't fix them. And so that is very important for people to understand, that when it comes down to domestic violence is a choice. It is not something that someone else's behavior is causing you to do. This is a choice. You're choosing to be violent. You're choosing to use violence to intimidate or to manipulate someone. It's a choice. And so with that said, just like the abuser should not have control over the victim, victims don't have control over the abuser either. So that means it doesn't matter what you do, whether you cook really well or whether you clean the house really well, you can't change him.
Wow. So, and I honestly, I kind of gave you that softball to tee up this whole conversation, because I see a lot, you and your staff talk a lot about just mentoring your staff. I mean, mentoring your clients and your survivors that come into your care, because a lot of them seem to think that it was something they did that triggered the violence. Am I safe to say that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Even when they call us on the crisis line, they're already saying, well, when he hit me, he didn't really mean to hit me that hard. I shouldn't have said what I said. They're already taking up for his actions. And the truth of the matter is that there's nothing that you could have did differently in order to help him change. Right. He has to make that decision on his own to change.
So
and
go ahead,
Jeffrey, just the other thing that I'd like to say about that is the survivor often gets told that it's her fault. If you would just do this differently, if you would cook the food better, if you would clean the house, if you would care for the children, whatever, if you would do these things, if you wouldn't nag me so much, then I wouldn't have to act this way. Right. So she's constantly being told that it's her fault and can come to believe that.
So this brings up a great kind of segue into the conversation. But before I ask some of the official questions, Lee, is that kind of the same feedback that you're getting from the batterer end of things, and how do you help them kind of course correct?
Yeah. So that it is a very similar narrative that we're hearing from the men who come to our program, that our first interaction, we do an inventory of their past abusive behavior. And much of that conversation is navigating the justifications that they used to use abusive behavior. And primary justification is her behavior, whether she wasn't taking care of the kids the way she should have been. She was abusing him. We get a lot of, well, she raised her voice, well, she hit me. And part of part of that process is shifting their perspective, similar to what Katha said. This process is about you learning you can't control her, and that what she does doesn't justify abusive behavior. So we don't start initially really interrogating too hard whether or not he's telling the truth. We just try to shift him around to take responsibility for what you did, leave out the story about what she was doing. And as long as they're willing to take responsibility for something, then they're a candidate to go further and actually enter the class with us.
An amazing start to this conversation, I think. So Nancy, could you tell us why intervention programs like the ones that Men Stopping Violence do, why are they so important?
Well, I think they're really, really the hope for change. A victim can leave her abuser, and I'll generally use the female pronoun. We know that about 85% of victims are female, and about 15% are men, and we certainly have served men that have been victims of abuse, both from a female and from a same-sex partner. So it's not unique to any population. But a survivor can leave her perpetrator, but if that person doesn't change, that person's going to go on probably to have another victim. And the mission of Partnership Against Domestic Violence is to end the crime of intimate partner violence. And so if we're really going to end that, then we have to deal with the abusive behavior and try and work with that abuser to get him or her to understand, again, that they are responsible, that it's not acceptable, and that it can change and that it can be different. And they can probably talk more about this, but it's not at all unusual for perpetrators of violence to have been victims of violence as children, victims of abuse as children, or to have grown up in homes where they witnessed abuse. So there's definitely a cycle of violence. So there's a lot of often with abusers, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of trauma that they've been through. And so that intervention can help them understand, oh, this is about what I witnessed, what I experienced. I really need to understand that and accept that so that I can do it differently going forward.
Amazing, Nancy. So Lee, I would like to throw it to you, man, and to give us a little bit more detail on how family violence intervention programs work.
Sure. So in Georgia, there are set standards for how intervention programs should be operating. So our minimum requirement for amount of classes is 24 weeks. Our classes at Men Stopping Violence are 2 hours each week. And the process is really split between holding men accountable and creating a process of accountability for men, and providing educational lessons about violence against women and tools that men can use to make non-abusive choices in the future. And it's a group process. And so that's, one of the things that research has continually found is when intervention programs are effective, part of the mechanism that makes them effective is creating a group community, a sense of community within the group that will also engage in holding each other accountable. So the accountability just doesn't come from the facilitators of the class. The accountability comes from a sense of belonging in a community where a group is working together to make non-abusive choices. And that's where change is possible. But similar to what Katha said earlier, we can't force a man to change. We don't have, the magic wand that if you complete our class, you're going to be non-abusive. It really is dependent on a man making that choice to no longer abuse. And a lot of our goal and a lot of the process in class is getting him to see the benefit of making that change, getting him to buy into the process. And then once he does that, then we've got a lot to offer. But if he never buys in, then we can't force him, basically.
So so Lee, you brought up a point, and I want to make sure I'm gonna kick it over to Nancy here in just a second for a follow-up question. But one of the follow-ups I have for you is, so do you see that there are batterers that will, after the program is complete, not have made a significant change in who they are as a person?
It's hard to judge. I mean, that's part of the limitation of a batterer program or an intervention program, is we have mechanisms in place to monitor his behavior change. We work with victim liaisons who are in contact with his partner or ex-partner, where we may get information about how he's doing. But sometimes, a man may be committed to doing the minimum, sliding through, and we're faced as an organization or as facilitators with a decision about whether he can continue to slide through without making significant effort, or if he would be disqualified. And so we have pretty strict guidelines in our contract about what participation and what accountability looks like in the program. So the person who is obviously not working to change and continuing to use abusive behavior throughout the program probably won't get to that final class and actually complete.
Wow. So Nancy, I want to. Lee brought up some awesome points about from the abuser's perspective or from the batterer's perspective. What should a victim look for when their abuser say, "Hey, I've changed. I'm a better person. I'm a different person." What should they look for?
Well, I think one thing is that the reality is an abuser is not going to change if there's not intervention. So I think when you talk about the cycle of violence and the blow up happens, the physical abuse happens, and then you go to the honeymoon stage. And I'm so sorry. I've heard survivors tell me that their abuser would cry more than they would after the abuse happened. And I'm so sorry. And we're going to pray about it. And we're going to go to couples counseling, and I'm going to do different. Those promises are just not going to happen. It really takes that intervention. It takes someone holding that abuser accountable, and that abuser finally saying, "You know what? It is my fault." Couples counseling, absolutely. We highly, highly, highly discourage couples counseling. It's not safe for the victim. If somebody held you up on the street with a gun, you wouldn't want to go to counseling with them to help them understand how they could treat you better.
Right.
And so when you've been really terribly hurt and abused, it's not safe for you to say how you feel in front of that person that's done that. I think if your abuser has gone through a program, I think some things to look for. Can you have an honest conversation? Can you say how you feel about things, and that abuser doesn't blow up and doesn't scream at you, but is willing to sit and listen and is willing to acknowledge that perhaps there's some truth in what you're saying? I think that's the most. And Lee, you probably can say some more about like when you feel like someone has really changed, the changes that you see. But I think number one is that ability to acknowledge, you know what, this was me. This was me. This wasn't your fault. This was me. And I am truly sorry for the pain and the harm that I've caused you and that I've caused our family.
Hey, I would like to actually do that real quick, just to get both Katha and Lee, get both of y'all's perspective on that same question. So and I'll go Katha, then Lee. What should a victim look for when an abuser says that they've changed?
They should look for the abuser taking the effort to change on their own and not being pushed to change. Because any behavior that needs to change, you have to make the choice on your own to want to change. And so if she doesn't see him, and it's going to take a process because it's not going to be instantaneous. So like, even if they go through, like he said, if they go through Men Stopping Violence, they go through the classes, there's still work to be done. And so it's a matter of, in the instance of a violent situation or where there's an argument that's about to escalate, can the abuser say, you know what, let's pause for a minute, let me walk away. You can see a glimpse of change right there, that they're making a different choice. So it takes time. I don't want to give a real formula as to what it may look like, but I do want to give the idea of that there are glimpses. You should see some sort of glimpses of change, something. It should not be the same as usual.
I love that. Lee, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I can just really reiterate part of that our stance from day one with men is that this process is going to take more than the 24 weeks that you're with us, right? So we can start the process. We can give you some tools. As Nancy said, it's about taking responsibility. So we've got a lot of mechanisms built into our class where men learn to take responsibility, men learn to listen, men learn to let their defenses down. All of those things are really helpful in the change process and in dealing with future conflict. But we also are clear that the expectation isn't perfection. When we look at our list of controlling and abusive behaviors that we use in class, things like interrupting, things like raising your voice, things that are pretty normalized, that are emotional abuse are on there. And so we expect accountability. So when you use those behaviors, you take responsibility for them. But a mistake or a abusive choice at some point in the program doesn't destroy the work that you've been doing. It's about getting used to a new normal, being responsible for your behaviors, being open to another person's perspective. And I think as Nancy said, you're not allowed to engage in couples counseling while you're in our program, but it's often an important step afterward. Once he has chosen to stop abusing, chosen to stop using controlling behavior, then there's a need for the two people to come back together as a couple and work through some of what's going on. We're only seeing one side, and the couple often needs support from both. And so our program synergizes really well with couples therapy. We get a lot of our referrals through couples counselors, and that's something that we always encourage. Because couples therapy isn't the right place, but it is useful to do both in conjunction if they're done in the right order.
So,
Jeffrey, I want to ask Lee.
Go ahead.
Just completely change up the format.
Yes.
But Lee, I'm curious to know let's say of the perpetrators that you serve in a year's time, what percentage, and I know you can't say exactly, but what percentage do you have a sense of that they've really moved forward and are really working on relationships in a non-violent, non-abusive way?
So it really depends on the length of time that they're with us. Mm-hmm. So we've sort of tracked the data over the last couple of years and have seen that once we get men over that initial hurdle, keep them in class for more than 6 weeks, then there is an investment. But there is a real difficulty getting men to make that initial investment. And so about a third of the men in our program don't continue after that first period. But again, going back to the research, the thing that is most effective is a man completing a class. It's not about the model that the class is using. It's not about the length of the class. It's just getting to that completion. So like having that sense of having accomplished something and sticking with it is really what makes the most difference. But I think, again, going back to something Katha said earlier, women are often told that they are responsible for his behavior. Men buy into that and they use that to justify abusive behavior. But that's not just a problem of his belief system. It's a problem of how our community sort of teaches, socializes. And so when we think about a man's change process, and you said this earlier, if we don't address his behavior, he's going to go and abuse another person. If we don't address the community's socialization of men and socialization into controlling behavior, then we're always going to have new men who are learning these beliefs that are going to commit acts of violence or abuse. So for us, the metric of success is not just the individual change process, but also how are we positively impacting a man's community and the community at large. So we've got requirements in our class for men to bring in other men from their community to participate in a couple classes. Our hope is that those people will be impacted and look at themselves, look in the mirror and see, maybe there's some things I can work on, as well as taking a deeper, creating a deeper sense of responsibility for those men to stay connected with the man in class, so that when he completes class, there's still a mechanism of accountability and support so that his change can be long lasting.
Lee, I think that's so important. I remember it was a podcast or something, but listening to a recording about and it was a man who had been a batterer and had gone through a family violence intervention program, and he talked about how much he liked it and how much he felt he benefited from it. But when he went back in his community, that abuse was still, male abuse of females was still very much a norm within his community, and how difficult it was for him to continue to move in that nonviolent direction and talk about the importance of being nonviolent, because it absolutely was not the norm in his community. So I think you having people bring men, friends to the group, not only hopefully are you creating change in those additional men as well, but you're creating a community of support for that perpetrator when he is back in his community. And I think that's so important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's very important. That community aspect when it comes to abusers as well as survivors of domestic violence, they need that a different community when they go back to being away from programs like ours. They still need to go back into a community that is supportive, that is helpful, that is a reflection of what a healthy relationship looks like. And that's why we do the work that we do, so we can, make change, not just with the individuals, but community as a whole. Yeah.
This is an awesome conversation. And again, I would like to just to reiterate before, if there's a question that you guys have, please feel free to drop it in the comment section. And then obviously, if you're listening and you're like, hey, I really want to connect in one way or the other to Partnership Against Domestic Violence or Men Stopping Violence, I just encourage you to visit either one of our websites, because there's a whole host of resources that are available. Lee, I want to jump in and ask you another question. And you touched on one way that somebody can become a part of an intervention program from a counselor referral. Are there any other ways that a person can become a part of an intervention program like yours?
Yeah, I think there's some mistaken assumption that you have to be referred by the criminal justice system to come to a program like ours. And that's not the case. Only about half the men in our program come through the criminal justice system.
Wow.
And then the other half come through community referrals. And so therapists and couples counselors are probably the second largest group of people who are referring to us. But we also get referrals through friend networks or word of mouth. We get referrals through universities or workplaces. And we get a lot of referrals through faith communities. And I think that's always one of the most powerful places we get referrals from, because it's an actual community who's standing up and saying, hey, this isn't acceptable. We need you to take responsibility and change your behavior. And a couple of years ago, we actually had a situation where a faith community learned about a husband abusing his wife, talked with the wife and said, hey, can we confront him? She agreed. They pulled his community together at the faith community, told him that they knew about his abusive behavior, told him that if he wanted to continue to be in this community, that he had to take responsibility and complete the Men Stopping Violence course. In that conversation, his father was there. His father stood up and said, well, if he has to go take the course, he's only doing the things that he's seen me do.
Wow.
So if he has to go take the course, then I should have to go as well.
Wow,
we had one of them enroll in one class and the other one enroll in another class. And that's the power that a faith community can, that's the impact that a faith community can have when they make that decision. Unfortunately, they often don't feel prepared or adequate to have that conversation. So and I know PADV does a lot of this as well. We work very closely with faith communities, helping them see the value in those kind of conversations and seeing how through collaboration we can really address the battering. And it's always our goal. We want to address it before it gets to the point where the police are involved. I think it's a much cleaner process when we catch it early and there's just not as much complication at that point.
Lee, I love what you said about the faith community and the power of those referrals. The Georgia Fatality Review Committee found that for women that are killed and for their perpetrators, the most common organization that they are associated with before that murder happens is a faith community.
Yeah.
So those are clearly so important in people's lives. And I remember sitting in on a support group at one point, and the woman saying that her batterer attacked her at their church, and the minister did nothing. And that gave her the message that it was okay, and that she needed to stay. I think sometimes when we've spoken to faith communities, there's the fear that, well, you're going to tell us how to practice our faith, or you're going to tell us that our messaging is wrong. And what we really, really say is absolutely not. That is not our role. That's your role. Our role is to help you provide safety and well-being and intervention when people in your community are in danger and in crisis. So let us be your referral. Let us be your knowledge base. Let us be your intervention when that's needed for folks in your congregation.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great.
So, Kath, I want to jump to you because there's a question I want to ask you, and I think it relates to all of this. When it comes to the violent behavior projected by their abuser, how do most victims respond to that?
Normally they blame themselves, or they try to minimize the violence that has taken place. And so it's for some reason with the situations when it comes to domestic violence, mostly they immediately blame themselves in some sort of way for the violence that has taken place. Whereas, if it was some random stranger on the street, they would immediately say that this person did the wrong thing. I was minding my business. But when it comes to this person that they love, they take up for them. They take up for that behavior. And they're like, there's got to be something that I've done that has caused this situation to take place. So that's mostly the ones that we interact with, even over the phone. They'll be calling us saying that, I just got beat up. I need a safe place to go. And then as we go through the call list of all the things that they've been through with the abuser, they'll start saying, well, he really didn't mean to do it like that. And he, because they're already defending him in the middle of trying to seek shelter. So that's most of the way it is. Yeah.
And Jeffrey, just let me add to that. I think the other thing that's really important for folks to realize is that physical violence is only one piece of the abuse, that it's a pattern of many different types of abusing and controlling behavior. So it can be financial abuse where the victim has no sense of the money coming into the household or how it's handled, or credit is ruined, or they're moving all the time. So their rental history is terrible. It can be the emotional abuse, the name calling, the ridiculing in front of other people. It can be sexual abuse. And so sometimes victims will think, well, he just shoves me every now and then. He just shakes me every now and then. And they don't look at it in the whole picture and realize that there's lots of different behaviors that are being used to create that control and that power over the victim.
This is an amazing conversation, because what I've heard so far from all of you, and then Katha added another layer on it, is that the abuser or batterer and batter/batterer is blaming the victim for the abuse, and the victim is also blaming him or herself for that same abuse. And nowhere in this process is until they get to a batterer intervention program, or the survivor gets to PDV, are we saying no? The abuse is totally pointed in the other direction, and and I'm sorry, there's no question in there. It's just baffling me in this moment to hear that and internalize that myself.
I think it's really connected with the mindset. If you've been in an abusive relationship long enough, you start believing the lies that have been told to you, that this is your fault. This is why I'm so hostile. This is why, because you start believing that. If that's all you hear from this person that's supposed to love you, over time, you're going to be like, man, well, maybe I should change my way to make this better. No.
I have a question, because and this is not in the list of questions I sent you guys, because again, we've talked about the viewpoint of, well, this is what the batterer sees, it's her fault. This is what the victim sees, it's her fault. What do the kids see? Like, if in that situation, what are the kids thinking in that same situation? Are the kids going, no, that's dad's fault? I mean, what's
It's
their
normally, depending on the children, it's maybe divided, where the children are seeing, yeah, mom, if you would just do better, like daddy said, this wouldn't be happening. And then you have those other children who are like, I will go toe to toe with my father if I need to protect my mother. So you know what I mean? It varies with the children. There's some children who see straight off hand, like, this is wrong. This is not right in any shape, way, form, or fashion. And then you have other children who are like, yeah, if mommy would just do better. So it varies.
And if I can,
go ahead, because obviously I'm at a loss.
That it's often a powerful question that we ask men. If did you witness abusive behavior growing up? And it's majority of men who are in our programs have. It's over 50%. And so what Katha described is exactly the kind of responses we get. Many were outraged. Many tried to intervene, but some blame their mothers for the abuse. And there's some pretty deep-seated trauma that's going on in all those instances. And we know that is a precursor for adult use of abusive behavior. So we use that experience of witnessing it and connecting with how it felt as a powerful way to help men see how they're affecting others. So the men who remember what it was like as a child, and then remember what it was like to see their child having witnessed their abuse, it's a pretty powerful impetus for change with a lot of men.
I tell you what, man, we've done, I think, Lee, in the pre-show, you asked how many of these had we done. It's probably somewhere between 10 and 15. Before the end of July, it'll be somewhere close to 20 of these. And I'm willing to bet right now, when I'm done with all of this, this is going to be my favorite conversation. Probably it'll be the one that I learned the most. This has just been an amazing conversation. And typically we say that this is only supposed to go about 30 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes, and we're already at 37 minutes. So I'm gonna wrap. I have probably two more questions, one for Lee, one for Katha. Nancy, actually no, I have one for Nancy as well. Nancy, quickly, how are intervention programs that we're describing here different from anger management courses?
Yeah, Jeffrey, that's a great question. And I'll just speak briefly, and Lee, I would love for you to talk about that as well. When domestic violence work first started, there was a lot of conversation about anger management. And that kind of was about, well, this guy just gets really angry and then he can't control himself. I think we've learned that that's absolutely not the case. Most batterers are not, when they get angry at work, they don't beat up their boss, they don't beat up people on the street. Again, that it's a pattern of behavior to gain control over somebody else. And that also kind of goes back to that it's not just the physical violence, it can be the emotional, the economic. So yeah, it's not about learning to manage your anger. It's about learning to have a very different perspective about power in male and female relationships and how those are equitable and healthy. And again, Lee, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's right on with how I see it as well. The other thing is, a lot of times men aren't angry when they're engaging in controlling behavior, right? So if we're just framing it as an anger issue, we're going to miss a lot of the tactics that are used to manipulate and to control.
Let me tell you, I'm fired up. This is such a great conversation. And I'm congested in the face, but I'm listening and I'm hanging on every word that all of you guys are saying, like, tell me more, give me more. I wish I had more questions. So really quickly, Katha, I'm going to end it with you, and then I'll close this out, because I definitely want people to not feel like they're watching a full TV show for an hour. But for victims that want the abuse to stop, yet they don't want the relationship to end, what do we say to them?
For those survivors who are want to stay in that relationship or want the abuse to end but don't want to end the relationship, I would recommend that they reach out to programs like Men Stopping Violence or give the referral information over to their abuser if they so choose to do so. That I would say that's one of the first steps for that abuse to change. It's sad that it has to be the victim giving the information to the abuser before the police do or the judge does. But if you want to stay in this relationship, and we desperately want you to be safe, I would say that it would be best for you to reach out to Men Stopping Violence and just to get more information, to share it. If your abuser is saying sorry after an incident of abuse or going through that honeymoon phase, then and I would recommend, hey, have you thought about going to Men Stopping Violence? If you love me so much, you're so sorry, your behavior has to change in some sort of way. So I would recommend that they reach out to Men Stopping Violence.
And I would say, kind of in what we were talking about earlier, like what are indications that that the abuser is changing? If he is willing to call, if he is willing to seek help on his own, if he's not saying, no, you need to do it, you need to call and get a resource, or again, you know, we need to go to couples counseling or we need to go to the preacher, but he's saying, yeah, you know what, I really need to, maybe you're right, maybe this is something I need to look at. That can be a really good indication that person is ready for help and ready to make change.
So Lee, if somebody needs to get in contact with you guys, they heard it, they really want to get involved, they want the counseling, you know, they want to be a part of the program, how do they do that?
First step is to give us a call. Our number is 404-270-9894. If you want to enroll in the program, that's how we can get you enrolled. We have extended office hours right now, so that anyone who's just finds themselves in a situation where they're building towards abuse and they want to make a different choice, you can call us in that moment and we can talk to you about your options. So it's sort of we want to be a resource in those moments. We also encourage if a woman wants to get their partner enrolled, we get a lot of calls from women, and we can certainly talk about what class might be like for him. But we also encourage reach out to PADV or another advocacy agency because they know also what to expect, what's realistic to expect, and so just having that in mind as well is really important for a partner. Like I said earlier, we don't have a magic wand. It's really about him wanting to take the responsibility, and if he doesn't do that, then there really isn't much hope for him changing his behavior.
Similar question to you as well, Kathy. If somebody's listening, if a survivor's listening, what should they do?
I would highly encourage them to call our crisis line. The number is 404-873-1766. Even if you don't want to give anything to your abuser, that's fine. But just reach out to us to even set up a counseling session for yourself. So you can or join one of our support groups, so you can be around other women who are experienced or have been through what you're going through right now, and who can encourage you. Because even we do have clients right now who are still in abusive relationships, yet they want to get help. They want to help themselves, and so they've been joining our right now. Our counseling has been gone virtual, and we also have support groups that have gone virtual as well. So I would encourage them to call us and reach out to us.
That's amazing. So, hey, just final thoughts, man. This has been, again, such a powerful conversation. Lee, thank you so much for not only joining us today, but man, I appreciate you for just what you're doing at Men Stopping Violence, because you guys are definitely making an impact. You're doing great work. And so obviously our relationship and our partnership is strong, and we want to keep it that way. So I put y'all's phone number in the comment section of this live. So I definitely encourage anybody who's out there who needs support, who needs to have a conversation with somebody, pick up the phone and call Men Stopping Violence. Or if you're a survivor or a survivor's friend, or just a loved one, somebody in that network or that community that the survivor needs, pick up the phone and call us as well. So Nancy, Katha, Lee, thank you guys so much for being a part of this conversation. I encourage everybody watching today, visit our website, PADV Atlanta, for more information. And connect with us on social at PADB Atlanta across Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And join us here on Tuesday. I think Tuesday we're going to be discussing domestic violence in the immigrant community. And then on next Friday, we're going to be talking about domestic violence and its effects on your health. And so really, really two great conversations coming up next week. So Nancy, Katha, Lee, thank you guys so much. Thank you everybody who's watching in the comment section. I see there's a lot of great people having just some conversation here. So we appreciate you guys for watching today. If there's something that we can do for you, all those in the comment section, again, feel free to reach out to us. Thank you guys so much, and we will see you next week. Bye.